All right, a busy day in Canberra. For their take on a busy day, let's bring in Sky News senior reporter Carolyn Marcus and our political reporter in Canberra, Cameron Reddard. Well, Cam, we haven't had you on the show, but I've watched you closely. Delighted to have your company tonight. Let's start with you if I can. That picture opportunity that the PM had with all these backbenchers today after a cabinet meeting yesterday to announce stuff that he's already got in a speech he's going to deliver tomorrow, cost us all $500,000 at least. What's the latest from inside Parliament House tonight? As I said, the PMs have headed, the MPs have headed off for their drinks with the PM at the Lodge. What's the latest?
Yeah, I wonder how many of those MPs, Peter, are having a slightly stiffer drink tonight after the way the caucus went, particularly those on thinner margins. I think the last count I did, there were 13 Labor MPs on a margin of 5% or less, and they're the ones that are really banking on the Prime Minister being able to sell this message. The message is coming out of caucus at the moment, of course, from some of the MPs that have been allowed to comment on the record, saying that it is unanimous support within that room. But, Peter, the challenge here really for the Prime Minister is if you're going to break the promise, you're going to have to make the sell job stick. He's now sold it to his colleagues. Tomorrow is the big sell to the nation. I think what makes it so interesting, Peter, is at the end of last year, we know there was some agitation from Labor MPs who were saying to senior members of the team that when people came up to them on the street, there weren't enough concrete measures they could point to say, this is how I'm helping you. You know, you could rattle off cheaper childcare, cheaper medicine, but if you weren't sick and you didn't have kids, then some of those MPs were struggling to sell that message. So even though some might now be able to say, well, you're getting XYZ tax cut, there'll also be some of them walking out of that caucus room today thinking, well, hang on, I'm on a 2% margin here. If you can't make this stick, then I'm in real trouble.
Yeah, Caroline, Cam's right there because he's hoping, or he's rolling the dice, that the class war rhetoric here that he will and all Labor MPs deploy now will trump the broken promise argument that I think the other side are going to run, and certainly most commentators certainly have picked up on. I mean, the Prime Minister's on camera 100 plus times. It's hard for him to hide from that. But the concern I'd have if I was a marginal seat member, well, mate, you told me all of this with the voice. You said we had that in the bag, and you were a terrible salesman there, and then you've hid your head under the doona ever since. So I don't know that he's got a lot of currency with the caucus about being a big picture salesman. We'll see. But what about those Teals? I mean, they ran a campaign last year about integrity in politics, but they're the ones out there urging the PM to break this commitment on these tax cuts. And of course, it'll hit their voters harder than anyone else.
There seems to be a lot of hypocrisy there from the Teals. Perhaps no huge surprise given some of the stories we've covered about the Teals in the last few years. Peter, I know that some of them, though, are not in support of changes to the tax cuts, like Allegra Spender, who is, of course, the MP, the federal MP for the wealthiest electorate in the country in Wentworth. She clearly sees that this is not going to play well with voters. But look, you're right. I don't think it matters how good a salesman he is. At the end of the day, while this is going to changes to the tax cuts provide some relief, a lot of relief for those lower to middle income earners, it is essentially a broken promise that Anthony Albanese is never going to be able to run away from. And I think that politics is a lot like relationships. If someone betrays you once, are you ever going to trust anything else that person is going to be able to say? Because fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. So when it comes to the next vote, any voter who goes to the polls and believes what Anthony Albanese and his government tells them are going to have to think twice about whether they can really trust it. He still hasn't delivered on his $275 power bill cost cut, and he's already backflipped on these promises.